Howdy, howdy, this is Mr. Potter. What we're going to be doing in today's video is talking about how HTTP, or the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is actually used to allow us to transmit data back and forth between users. So we've talked about TCP, we've talked about Transfer Control Protocol. On the internet, we have the physical internet. In other words, the actual wires. And then on top of that, we have the Internet Protocol. This is where we have our IPv4. We have our four groups of numbers that determine a computer's address on the internet. Or if you're using IPv6, it's going to be 6 groups of 4-digit numbers. And then on top of that, we have our Transfer Control Protocol. The Transfer Control Protocol is what actually allows the computers to connect to each other through the synchronization and acknowledgement system. On top of that, we have HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So we have our Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So this is going to transform the HTML files that a lot of the internet has made and allow it to transmit it to our internet address via the TCP protocol. So this is another technique that we have to transfer data across the internet, in particular hypertext data. So the first that we have is a request header, and so our computer, when we want to get some information, is going to send something out on the internet. So I'm going to see usually a get, and this is going to tell the computer exactly what file it is that we want. And then it's going to have to get some information. So I'm going to have something like images/pic.jpg. In other words, some picture file that's going to be downloaded as part of the HTML file or the HTML file itself. And then I'm going to see HTTP/1.1. This is going to be the version number that we're dealing with. And then we'll also see host, and host is going to be the website that we're requesting the information from. So I could have something like en.wikipedia.org. And what this will do is this will request from wherever wikipedia.org is, request this particular file. And we mentioned in our previous video how the internet goes from having a domain name to having an IP address. But the IP address will eventually receive this information, and then we'll actually get information back. So when we get our information back, you'll actually see a response header. So you'll actually see information that's going to give us stuff. So we'll see HTTP/1.1, again the version number, and then we will see a status code. Now here our status code for this particular file is going to be 200, which represents OK. In other words, the computer was able to give us what it wants, and we're getting what we want. And then you're going to see a MIME type, so content type colon, and it's going to tell us what type we're going to get. So here we're getting an image type /JPEG. And JPEG is a type of image. I could see text/HTML, or I could see audio/MP3, or I could see video/MP4. Basically, it's telling us what the type is and what the file extension is that we're dealing with. And then after that, I'm going to see a series of zeros and ones. And this is our actual data that we receive. So I'm going to get this from the response header from my request. Now, if this was just dealing with the Internet 1.0, where all we're dealing with is static web pages, then all I'm going to be using is the get. But of course, nowadays we're used to a more dynamic internet, and we'll actually use something called post. And this allows us to post information to our host. So this would allow me to update something. But I still have to give it the file that we're trying to post to, so I'm going to see some file here, like I'll see JS/Java script 1.js. And again, the format, HTTP 1.1, and then this would be the data that my computer is sending. And I would still receive some type of response from that. In other words, this may be the updated HTML file. This may be a different file that is going to get posted onto our existing HTML file, but I'm going to get some type of response header back. What's important to note is this idea of a response code, which we're going to talk about here. There are lots of different status codes, and probably the ones that we're most familiar with are 200, which is okay. This is the one that we get the most because most times when I type in a web address, it just works. But I never actually see the error code 200. The error codes that we usually see more often is we'll see 404. So 404 is our typical file not found. Or maybe I'll see 401, which means authorization required. In other words, I didn't type in my password correctly. Now, most web pages won't actually tell us 404 or 401. What will happen is we'll get a specific page from that web server that says file not found, or we'll get a specific page from that web server that says authorization required, telling us that we need to log in or telling us that what we're looking for is not here or may take us to a search page. Another error that we actually may see the code for is error code 500. And error code 500 means that there is some type of internal server error. So what I may see is if I'm trying to access a website that's under heavy traffic, the website can't fulfill its obligation to me to send that web page. Or maybe the web page is under attack, or maybe the web server has used up its quota of data for that particular hour, and so it can't provide the resource that we've requested. There are a couple of other status codes that we have. There's a lot in the 400, and these 400 are going to deal with situations where the server acknowledges our request but refuses our request for various reasons. 200 is basically saying, hey, everything's hunky-dory. 500 is telling us, hey, there was an issue on my end, and it's actually the lack of response that your browser is giving you this, telling you, hey, I never got a response from this. This must have been the error. There are a couple of other codes that we'll see. We'll see a 301 code. And what 301 code means is that the data is moved permanently. In other words, this may be a redirection. So if you've ever typed in a web page and you get sent to a new web page, this may be the original response was the 301 response, and then the next page will be a 200 OK. Or you may also see something like 302, which is moved temporarily. And this you may see like for sporting events where, the World Series doesn't happen every year, and so I'm not going to have a live update of World Series events unless it's the month of October or November. If it's not the month of October or November, I may just redirect you to the Major League Baseball site. Or if it's not June, then I'm not going to talk to you about the NBA Finals. I'm going to redirect you to just the generic NBA page. Or if it's a class, then there may be, a specific page that goes with final exams, as opposed to, okay, well, here's our traditional lecture and where you turn in your homework. These static codes are often just used by the browser, but they give us information as to what's actually happening on the internet. And what you're going to do in your activity on the code.org website is you're going to type in some web addresses and see what type of codes you get. Keep in mind that when I talk about an HTML file, there are actually lots of different resources that I'm going to have access to other than just the straight old text that I'm going to be reading. I have all of the images, I'm going to have video, I'm going to have sound, I'm going to have connections to other pages, because I know a lot of pages are connected so that I can tweet about a page that I'm looking at, or I can link to it on some other social media. If I'm on YouTube, then there's a little place where I can actually type in a comment, which you can do down below. There are lots of things that I can see, not just the actual text of the HTML file. This is the Internet 2.0 after all, and we do see a lot of dynamic web pages that we can interact with. And it's through these interactions that we additionally get some of these codes. Sometimes the interactions won't work, and sometimes the interactions will. Most of the time they do, and we just never notice any issues. So that's how HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, works on top of the existing layers of the Internet. And it's worked very well for the past 20 years. It's going to continue to work well. So once again, this is Mr. Potter. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.